I never expected betrayal to wear my father's face. For years, I tried to be the daughter he could finally be proud of, while my sister stood on her pedestal, basking in the spotlight of his endless praise. But the night he handed me legal papers, stripping me of my inheritance and my place in this family, something inside me shattered. I realized I was never meant to belong here. I was meant to rise above them. They thought they buried me, but they had only planted me. And at the family reunion, they would witness my rebirth. I grew up inside walls of marble and glass, a house so large it could swallow entire lives without anyone noticing. The halls echoed with the sound of footsteps that never belonged to me. Every photograph on the walls, gilded in ornate frames, told the same story. My father, Richard, smiling with his arm around my sister Victoria, his pride and joy. I was there too, of course, always pushed to the side, blurred into the background, my smile a little too stiff, my eyes a little too empty. At 36, I still felt like the unwanted guest in my own family. To the world outside, we were perfection incarnate. My father hosted charity galas, business partners toasted to his legacy, and relatives whispered in awe about his empire. And he never missed a chance to parade Victoria as his golden heir, my brilliant daughter, the future of our name, the living proof of my sacrifices. Meanwhile, I learned to master the art of silence, a quiet smile, a nod at the right moment, a glass of champagne that never touched my lips. But silence has a weight. It presses into your chest until you forget how to breathe. At dinner one evening, while crystal clinked and servants poured wine, my father looked across the table at me and sighed. "I just wish you could be more like your sister." His words landed softly, almost tender, but they sliced through me sharper than any blade. Victoria smirked, her manicured hand resting lazily on her wine glass, as if the world was arranged exactly as it should be. I tried to shrug it off, to laugh it away. "I'm not her, Dad. I'm me." He chuckled, a hollow, dismissive sound. "Yes, but being you doesn't take us very far, does it?" The table laughed with him, or maybe they just followed his cue, a performance rehearsed too many times. I kept my smile frozen, but something inside me recoiled, a small part of myself shrinking further into shadow. Victoria leaned closer, her perfume thick and sweet. "Don't take it personally, Rachel. You know how Dad is." Her voice dripped with condescension. Then she whispered, "Just for me. Maybe if you actually achieved something, he wouldn't have to say it." I pushed my plate away, appetite gone. Across from me, Father raised his glass to Victoria, pride shining in his eyes. To me, there was nothing but disappointment. Days blurred into weeks and the cracks widened. Father began excluding me from meetings at the family company, decisions made without my knowledge. Victoria's name appeared in press releases, while mine vanished. Every attempt I made to contribute was brushed aside. "You worry too much," Father said once, when I tried to raise a concern about the firm's finances. "You don't understand how these things work. Leave it to people who know what they're doing." I wanted to scream, but I studied finance too. I worked for this. Instead, I bit my tongue until it bled. One afternoon, passing Father's study, I noticed the door left slightly ajar, his deep voice carried out, low and commanding. Curiosity tugged at me, pulling me closer. He was on the phone, his tone sharp. "Yes, I've finalized it. Victoria will be the sole heir." "Rachel? She'll get nothing. It's better this way." My breath caught. Papers shuffled, and I saw a glimpse through the crack. Father's hand resting on a legal document, the bold title at the top, unmistakable. Last Will and Testament. I stumbled back before he noticed me, heart pounding in my chest. A wave of nausea washed over me. He was rewriting the future, erasing me as if I had never been his daughter at all. Later that night, I found the courage to confront him. "Dad, I saw something in your study. Are you changing the will?" My voice trembled, but I forced the words out. His eyes hardened. For a moment, the mask slipped, and I saw the cold steel beneath. Then he smiled, almost indulgent. "You must be mistaken. Don't let your imagination run wild, Rachel." Gaslighting. The word rang in my mind. He wanted me to doubt my own eyes, my own sanity. Victoria, overhearing from the hall, chimed in sweetly. "Honestly, Rachel, you really need to stop overthinking. It's exhausting for everyone." She laughed, and Father joined her, their voices entwined in cruel harmony. I retreated to my room, but I couldn't silence the memory of those words. They rang in my ears like a curse. "She'll get nothing." The next morning, as I descended the staircase, voices drifted from the sitting room. I froze halfway down when I heard my father's voice again, low but distinct. "She doesn't deserve it, Victoria. Everything belongs to you. Rachel was never meant for this family's legacy." My sister's laughter followed, triumphant and sharp. "Don't worry, Daddy. She'll never fight back. She's too weak." I gripped the railing, knuckles white, heart hammering in my chest. For the first time, rage stirred beneath the grief. They thought I was weak. They thought I would fade into the margins of the family portrait, but I wasn't going anywhere. And they would soon learn how wrong they were. The morning after I overheard my father's words, the house no longer felt like a home. The marble floors that once gleamed with pride seemed cold, echoing every step I took like a reminder that I didn't belong here. At the breakfast table, Richard discussed company strategies with Victoria, his voice warm and approving. My chair was set, but no one looked at me. When I tried to offer an idea about a potential investment I had researched, he waved his hand as though I were an annoying child interrupting serious business. "Not now, Rachel. You wouldn't understand the complexities," he said, pouring more coffee into Victoria's cup without even meeting my eyes. I felt my throat tighten. Wouldn't understand? I spent years studying finance. I've been in the office every day. Why can't he see me? But my voice never rose. Silence, again, was safer. Soon, the whispers began. At first, they were subtle, woven into conversations like threads you could almost ignore. "Poor Rachel," an aunt murmured at a brunch. "She never quite grew into her potential." At a charity dinner, I overheard a board member ask Victoria, "Is it true your sister struggles with emotional issues?" Victoria tilted her head, feigning concern. "She's sensitive, you know. Always has been. We try to support her." Her tone was dripping with fake compassion, but her smirk told another story. I wanted to scream. I wanted to drag her into the light and reveal the cruelty behind that carefully polished smile. Instead, I laughed when she made jokes at my expense, as though I were in on it, though inside I felt myself dissolving. At night, staring into the ornate ceiling of my bedroom, I whispered into the emptiness. Maybe they're right. Maybe I am the weak one. It was during one of those sleepless nights that my phone buzzed. An unknown number. My first instinct was to ignore it, but curiosity won. I opened the message. 5 words glowed against the dark screen. "Be careful. They're setting you up." My breath hitched. My hands shook so violently I nearly dropped the phone. Who would send this? A prank? A threat? Or a warning? I wanted to believe someone out there cared enough to protect me. But trust was dangerous currency in my family, and I had none left to spend. The message burned in my mind the next morning as I walked into the company office. Whispers followed me again, hushed voices behind glass walls, quick glances at me before darting away. I caught snippets. She mishandled the account. "Did you hear about the missing funds?" "Richard is furious." I frowned. Missing funds? What were they talking about? My desk had been stripped of important documents. The financial reports I'd prepared, the ones that showed irregularities in the budget, had vanished. When I asked the accounting team, they avoided my gaze. That afternoon, Richard summoned me to his office. His jaw was clenched, his eyes cold. On his desk lay a report with my signature scrawled across it. Numbers circled in red, columns highlighted. "Explain this," he demanded. I picked up the file, my eyes scanning the page. My signature was there, but the figures had been altered. Millions had been shifted into phantom accounts I had never seen. "This isn't mine," I whispered. He slammed his fist on the desk. "Don't play games with me. Do you realize the damage you've done? Investors are calling me every hour. Do you want to destroy this family?" My lips parted, but no words came. Victoria slipped in, her heels clicking softly on the floor. "Dad, don't be too harsh," she said sweetly, placing a hand on his arm. "Rachel's been under so much pressure. She doesn't think clearly sometimes." Her eyes flicked toward me, triumphant, daring me to fight back. I felt the room tilt. The walls seemed to close in, suffocating me. Am I losing my mind? Did I sign something without remembering? The seed of doubt they had planted years ago sprouted in me again, wrapping around my ribs like vines. That evening, I wandered back into the office long after everyone had left, desperate to prove my innocence. My hands shook as I rifled through filing cabinets, drawers, folders. Then, tucked behind a stack of old invoices, I found it, a flash drive taped under the drawer. My heart leapt. Why would anyone hide this here? I plugged it into my laptop. Dozens of files appeared. Bank transfers, secret accounts, proof of money siphoned from the company's funds. My father's name was everywhere. The missing money wasn't missing at all. He had taken it, and somehow he had pinned it on me. I sat frozen, staring at the screen, my pulse pounding in my ears. This is it. This is the truth. But if I know, does he know I know? I yanked the USB out and shoved it deep into my coat pocket, my breath ragged. The office was too quiet, the shadows too heavy. I glanced around, half expecting to see Richard standing in the doorway, watching me. Every sound, the hum of the air conditioner, the creak of the floorboards, felt like a warning. I clutched the USB so tightly it left marks in my palm. Was this the lifeline the mysterious message hinted at? Or was I walking straight into the trap they had set for me? My phone buzzed again. Same number. Another message. Now you know. Don't trust anyone. I froze, the glow of the screen lighting my face in the darkened office. My heart thudded so loud I was sure someone could hear it. I slipped the phone back into my pocket, forcing my breathing to slow. My father was not just cruel. He was dangerous. And my sister? She wasn't just basking in his favor. She was part of this. The realization was a knife, sharp and cold, cutting through the last threads of denial I had clung to for years. I pressed my back against the door, listening for footsteps. Nothing. Only silence. But silence in my family had never been safe. And for the first time, I wasn't sure if I would make it out of this house alive. The night of the family gathering arrived, draped in gold and velvet. Chandeliers spilled light over crystal glasses, silver cutlery gleamed, and the scent of roses drifted through the air. To outsiders, it was a scene of elegance, of legacy preserved in marble and champagne. For me, it was a stage, and I was the unwilling actor in their script. Richard sat at the head of the table, towering in presence, his tailored suit as sharp as the steel in his eyes. Victoria glowed beside him, basking in every approving glance. I was placed at the far end of the table, as always, the distance between us measured not only in feet, but in decades of neglect. When dessert arrived, Richard cleared his throat. The chatter softened into silence. He stood, holding a leather folder in his hand, his voice booming with the authority of a man used to being obeyed. "Tonight," he announced, "I wish to share news of the future of this family." I felt my chest tighten. My heart knew before my mind could form the thought. He opened the folder, pulled out a stack of papers, and began reading. Words blurred, but certain phrases cut like glass. Revised inheritance. Sole beneficiary, Victoria Hastings. Exclusion of Rachel Hastings from all claims. My hands went cold against the tablecloth. I couldn't move. My sister's lips curled into a smile so triumphant it might as well have been a crown placed on her head. The rest of the family remained silent, their eyes darting between us like spectators at a cruel sport. No one spoke. No one defended me. I managed a whisper that barely escaped my throat. "I'm not his daughter anymore." The thought wasn't about blood. It was about belonging, about being erased from the only family I had ever known. As the applause erupted for Victoria, Richard leaned close to me, his cologne stinging my senses. His voice was low, meant only for me. "Tomorrow it will be official. Disappear quietly, Rachel." "Don't make a scene!" My breath caught. My hands shook. For a second, I thought I might faint, but I forced myself to sit still, staring at my untouched dessert as though it could anchor me. That night, I sat alone in my room, the golden chandelier above me casting cruel shadows that danced like ghosts. My phone buzzed again, the same unknown number. This time, I didn't hesitate to open it. Tomorrow is only the beginning. Stay alive. Sleep never came. My mind twisted itself into knots, replaying every look, every cruel word. My father's laughter rang in my ears. My sister's smirk haunted me. I stood at the mirror, staring into my reflection, searching for cracks. My eyes were red, my lips pale. Maybe I really am weak, I thought. Maybe they're right. Maybe the world would be quieter without me. The next week passed in a blur. Calls from acquaintances dried up. Friends who once invited me to lunch stopped answering. When I reached out, they replied with careful, clipped messages. "Maybe you should rest. I heard you're not doing well." The rumors had spread beyond the family. My father's poison had seeped into every corner of my life. I stopped going to the office. The weight of silence crushed me. Some mornings I couldn't get out of bed. Other nights, I stared at the bottle of sleeping pills on my nightstand, wondering how many it would take. The thought terrified me as much as it soothed me. Then, one rainy afternoon, a knock echoed on my door. I almost didn't answer, but when I opened it, a man stood there drenched, clutching an umbrella and a small leather bag. His eyes searched mine with urgency. "Rachel Hastings?" he asked. I hesitated. "Yes. Who are you?" "My name doesn't matter, but I know what they're doing to you. I know what they've taken." My stomach dropped. "You sent the messages." He nodded, his voice lowered, heavy with something like guilt. "I used to work for your father. I trusted him. He destroyed me, just like he's destroying you." My throat went dry. "Why are you here?" He opened the bag, pulled out a small black USB drive, and pressed it into my palm. His hand was trembling. This is everything. The accounts, the transfers, the lies. He buried me with them, but I made copies before I lost everything. I kept them safe, waiting for someone brave enough to use them. I stared at the device. It felt impossibly heavy for something so small. "Why give this to me?" I asked. "Because," he said, his eyes burning with a mix of anger and sorrow, "you're the only one who can bring him down. But understand this, once you open it, there's no turning back. It will change everything." His words lingered in the air, thick and suffocating. My heart pounded. I closed my fingers around the USB, the metal biting into my skin. Change everything. The phrase echoed in my skull. My family had stolen my voice, my dignity, my place in the world. Maybe this was my chance to reclaim it, or to lose myself entirely. When I looked up, the man was already walking into the storm, swallowed by the rain. I wanted to call after him, to ask his name, to beg for guidance. But the words stuck in my throat, as they always did. I shut the door and leaned against it, the house eerily silent around me. The USB burned like a brand in my hand. What secrets lay inside? What truths had my father fought so hard to bury? I didn't know yet, but I knew this. The world I thought I lived in, the family I thought I belonged to, was gone. And as I held that small black drive, I felt the first spark of something I hadn't dared to touch in years. Not hope. Rage. I sat at my desk, the small USB drive trembling in my palm. For hours, I stared at it as if it were a live grenade. Finally, I slid it into my laptop. The screen blinked, a folder opened, and my father's empire spilled out in numbers, contracts, and hidden accounts. Millions funneled offshore, names scrubbed from documents. transactions disguised with surgical precision. My chest tightened as I scrolled, the weight of betrayal growing heavier with each file. But it was the folder labeled private that broke me. Inside were photos, grainy at first, then clearer. Richard's face, unmistakable, pressed close to a woman who was not my mother. Smiles, hotels, trips spanning years. My hands shook violently. My mother had devoted her life to him, dimming her own brilliance to feed his ego. And all along, he had been living a second life. Tears blurred my vision, but then something else emerged. A letter signed by Victoria. Her handwriting looped elegantly across the page. She hadn't just known about the offshore accounts. She had signed off on them. She had protected him. She had traded her silence for the crown he promised her. The room tilted. For decades, I believed my sister was the golden child because she was smarter, more capable, more worthy. But the truth was uglier. She wasn't better. She was complicit. She had chosen his love over justice, sold her soul for inheritance and applause. A fire roared awake inside me. The years of silence, of being the family's scapegoat, of swallowing humiliation. Suddenly, it all crystallized. I wasn't the weak one. I was the only one who hadn't traded my integrity. My pain sharpened into fury, pure and electric. I pressed my palms flat on the desk, leaning closer to the laptop screen. If they want to destroy me in front of everyone, I whispered to the empty room, then I'll destroy them in front of the world. The words felt like a vow carved into stone. The next day, I walked into a law office tucked inside an old brick building downtown. The receptionist led me to a conference room where a man in a navy suit waited. His name was David. My mysterious informant had recommended him. He looked me over carefully, his eyes calm but sharp. "You're Rachel," he said. "I've heard things." I slid the USB across the table. "Then you'll want to see this." For the next hour, I watched his expression shift from curiosity to disbelief to grim certainty. When he finally looked up, he said, "If half of this is true, your father is finished. These documents, embezzlement, fraud, tax evasion. This isn't just a family matter. It's criminal." My pulse quickened. "Can you help me?" "Yes," he said without hesitation. "But Rachel, understand, this won't just bring him down. It will bring everyone tied to him down, including your sister. Are you ready for that?" I hesitated. The image of Victoria laughing at me, whispering poison into my father's ear, flashed in my mind. Then I remembered the signatures on those documents, the proof she was no innocent bystander. "Yes," I said, my voice steady. "I'm ready." Over the next weeks, I became someone I didn't recognize. I met David in quiet cafes, slipped him folders I'd smuggled out of the office, memorized dates and account numbers, built a case brick by brick. For the first time in years, I felt purposeful. Every document I uncovered, every lie I exposed, was a weapon forged from their own corruption. Still, the walls pressed in. Victoria's whispers grew louder, more venomous. My phone buzzed with veiled threats. Anonymous voices called me late at night, warning me to stop digging. One evening, as I left David's office with a folder tucked under my coat, I found the mysterious man waiting in the shadows. His coat was soaked, his eyes hollow but burning. "They know," he said. "They're planning something for the reunion. They won't just cut you out, Rachel. They want to break you publicly, finally. If you're not ready, you'll walk straight into their trap." My heart skipped. "What do you mean?" He leaned closer. "I heard Victoria. She said they'll make sure you leave in disgrace, that you'll beg for mercy. They've prepared more than you realize." I swallowed hard, gripping the folder against my chest. "Then I'll prepare harder." He gave a bitter smile. "Good. Just don't underestimate how far they'll go. Your father doesn't lose." I returned home and locked myself in my room, the mansion's silence pressing down like a weight. Standing before the mirror, I studied the woman staring back. The sadness in her eyes was fading, replaced by something sharper, colder. The curve of my lips didn't quite form a smile, but it was no longer a mask. It was resolve. The chandelier above me flickered, casting shards of light across the mirror. For years, I had been the shadow in the family portrait. Now I was stepping into the fire. I leaned forward, whispering to my reflection, "I may not be your chosen daughter, but I will be your reckoning." The glass caught my gaze, and for the first time in my life, I didn't see weakness. I saw steel, and I knew the game had only just begun. The ballroom glowed with chandeliers, each crystal shard scattering light across velvet drapes and polished marble floors. Laughter mingled with the clink of glasses. Waiters glided like shadows, balancing silver trays of champagne and caviar. I moved through the crowd, my gown a river of midnight silk, my face a mask of serenity. Inside, my pulse thundered like war drums. At the center of the room, Richard stood tall, commanding attention with nothing more than his presence. "Tonight," he boomed, "we celebrate legacy." Guests erupted into applause. They adored him, worshipped him. I saw Victoria glide onto the stage, her golden dress shimmering like a crown. She leaned against our father, smiling as though she had already claimed the throne. I clenched the USB in my clutch. For 36 years I had been silent, invisible, erased. Tonight, I would no longer stand at the edges of the family portrait. Richard raised a hand and the music faded. "My friends, my family," he began. "Why, for decades I have built an empire, and tonight I announce its future. The sole heir of the Hastings fortune, the one worthy of carrying our name is—" He paused for dramatic effect, savoring the moment. "My eldest daughter, Victoria." Applause thundered again. Victoria tilted her chin, eyes glittering with victory. My chest tightened, but not with grief. This time, with fire. I stepped forward, heels clicking against marble. Heads turned. A ripple of whispers followed me as I approached the stage. "Father," I said, my voice steady, surprising even myself. "Before you finish, I think everyone should see this." I pulled the USB from my clutch and handed it to the technician at the projector. The screen behind us flickered, and suddenly, rows of numbers, bank accounts, and signatures filled the room. Gasps erupted. "What is this?" someone whispered. "This," I said, gripping the microphone, "is the truth. The empire you've all admired was built on lies, on stolen funds, on betrayal." Richard's face froze, then hardened. "Rachel, stop this nonsense." But the slides kept coming. Offshore accounts, fake invoices, transfers signed in his name. Then came the photographs. Richard with his mistress, arms wrapped around her in hotel lobbies, vacations in Paris, gifts of jewelry worth millions. My mother's face flashed through my mind, her years of silent devotion mocked by each image. The room erupted into chaos. Gasps turned to whispers, whispers to shouts. Victoria rushed forward, her perfect smile cracking. "This is a lie. She's fabricating everything." I turned, eyes locking with hers. "Really, Victoria? Because I also found these." Another slide appeared, contracts bearing her signature. She had approved the fraudulent transfers. And then, the final blow. Emails exchanged between her and one of our father's fiercest rivals. Words of loyalty, promises made in exchange for his silence. The color drained from her face. The crowd erupted, voices sharp, accusing. Business partners who had once bowed to Richard now glared with betrayal. A cousin shouted, "You ruined us!" Another relative hissed, "How could you?" For a brief moment, I allowed myself to breathe. The fire inside me glowed brighter. Justice was within reach. But then Richard stepped forward, eyes blazing with cold fury. He raised his hand again, and the room fell eerily quiet. "You think this proves anything?" he said, his voice low and dangerous. "Do you really believe anyone here will take your word over mine?" "You've always been unstable, Rachel. Everyone knows it. You forged those files. You've always wanted to destroy this family." The room shifted uneasily. I felt the old doubt clawing at me again. What if they believe him? What if I fall back into that shadow? Richard's gaze burned through me. "This pathetic display ends now. And then, before he could continue, the doors to the ballroom burst open. The sound of heavy footsteps echoed across the marble floor. David entered, flanked by 2 uniformed police officers. He carried a thick folder stamped with the seal of the federal court. "Mr. Hastings," he said, voice ringing with authority, "you're under arrest for fraud, embezzlement, and obstruction of justice." The room gasped again, but this time the whispers carried a different tone: fear, outrage, betrayal. Richard's face contorted, the mask shattering completely. "This is absurd. Do you know who I am?" "Yes," David said calmly, "and that's why this is happening." The officer stepped forward, snapping cold steel handcuffs around Richard's wrists. The sound was louder than any applause I had ever heard in this house. Victoria stumbled back, her perfect poise unraveling. "Daddy, say something! Tell them it's not true!" But Richard remained silent, his jaw locked, his eyes burning with venom. He looked at me as if he could kill me with a glance. Then, in the chaos, another voice rose from the crowd. My uncle, a man who had always been quiet in family gatherings, stepped forward. "We knew," he said, his voice trembling but strong. "We all knew. We stayed silent because we thought Richard was untouchable. We waited for someone to stand against him. Rachel, you've done what none of us could." One by one, more relatives murmured their agreement. Years of silence cracked open, truth spilling into the light. Victoria's eyes widened, realizing her fortress of loyalty had always been a facade. I stood taller, the microphone trembling slightly in my hand, but my voice steady. "For years you told me I was worthless, that I was nothing. Tonight, I give you the truth, and the truth will bury you." The police began leading Richard away. He twisted his head toward me, his voice like poison. "This isn't over, Rachel. You've made an enemy you'll regret." His eyes blazed, a storm of fury and betrayal, promising war even as the cuffs bit into his skin. And as the doors closed behind him, shutting out his fury from the glittering ballroom, I felt the silence rush back in. But this time, it was different. Because for the first time, the silence was his. And the night was mine. The morning after the reunion, the mansion stood eerily silent. No more champagne glasses, no more rehearsed laughter echoing off marble walls. The newspaper headlines screamed of Richard Hastings' arrest, splashing his face across every front page. Words like fraud, embezzlement, betrayal bled in black ink, dragging the once glorious family name into the mud. For the first time in my life, I saw him powerless, his empire crumbling not from external enemies, but from the rot within. Victoria vanished from the spotlight. Her gilded image shattered overnight as the emails between her and father's rival flooded the internet. Business partners cut ties. Invitations to galas disappeared. Friends who once clung to her skirts turned their backs. She stood alone, stripped of her golden aura, her tears now met with silence instead of sympathy. I watched it all unfold, not with joy, but with an unfamiliar calm. The poison they had poured into me for years now spilled back into their own mouths. And yet, something unexpected happened. Cousins who had once whispered about my supposed fragility began reaching out. A distant aunt called, her voice trembling with guilt. "We should have spoken up earlier, Rachel. We were afraid." I listened, not with bitterness, but with quiet understanding. For the first time, I wasn't the scapegoat. I was the survivor, the one who stood tall when the golden walls collapsed. Still, when the lawyers called, offering me the empire I had fought so hard to expose, I hesitated. The documents named me as the rightful heir now, the one to inherit everything my father had built and corrupted. The weight of it pressed heavily on me. I stared at the papers, pen in hand. I thought about the marble halls that had caged me, about the golden frames where I was always pushed to the edge. I thought about my father's last words, the venom in his eyes as the handcuffs closed around his wrists. Did I really want to inherit his empire? Did I want his poison to seep into me, to define me as it had defined him and Victoria? I set the pen down. My voice was calm, but inside, something fierce burned. "No," I whispered. "This is not my legacy. My freedom is." When I announced my decision publicly, the shock was palpable. Gasps rippled through the family, through the press. They expected me to seize everything to become the queen in Victoria's place. Instead, I walked away, leaving the poisoned crown to crumble in the dirt. For once, the applause was genuine, not the polite clinking of glasses in a golden cage, but raw, unpolished admiration. Strangers stopped me on the street, thanking me for exposing the truth. Survivors of toxic families wrote to me, sharing their stories, their scars. For the first time, I wasn't alone. With the inheritance off my shoulders, I felt lighter, freer. I moved out of the mansion and rented a modest apartment by the water. The air smelled of salt and freedom. I filled the walls not with gilded portraits, but with photographs I had taken myself, sunsets, city lights, faces of friends who truly loved me. I built a new kind of family, not bound by blood, but by choice. People who saw me not as a shadow, not as a scapegoat, but as Rachel, flawed, resilient, alive. And I spoke. At first, it was to small groups, survivors of families like mine. Then, at larger gatherings, conferences, interviews, I told my story, not for vengeance, but for healing. I told them that survival was not weakness, that walking away was not defeat, that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is refuse to inherit the poison passed down to you. Each time I spoke, I felt another piece of myself return, stronger, steadier. The fire that once burned in rage became a steady flame, a guiding light for others. One morning, I drove past the old mansion. The gates were rusting, the garden overgrown, the golden facade dulled by neglect. I stopped the car and stood before it, the air cool against my skin. Sunlight broke through the clouds, spilling across the crumbling stone, turning decay into something almost beautiful. I breathed deeply, the scent of wet earth filling my lungs. For years, this house had been my prison, my nightmare. Now it was just a building, hollow, powerless. "They thought they buried me," I whispered, my voice carried by the wind. "But they only planted me." I turned away, ready to step into the life I had chosen. And then, just as I opened my car door, a black car rolled slowly down the road. The tinted window lowered. For a split second, I caught a glimpse of Victoria's face, pale but burning with fury. Our eyes met across the distance. Her lips curved into something between a smile and a snarl. The car drove past without stopping, vanishing into the horizon. My heart pounded, not with fear this time, but with certainty. They were gone, but not finished. I slid into the driver's seat, the sunrise spilling gold across my dashboard. My hands gripped the wheel, steady, strong. "They took everything from me," I said aloud, my voice firm, my reflection in the rearview mirror meeting my gaze without flinching. "But in doing so, they gave me the only thing that matters, myself." I started the engine. The road stretched before me, endless, open, waiting, and somewhere in the distance I could still feel the storm gathering.